Welcome to the Medical Missions Unfiltered podcast, a branded podcast of the Jonah Inheritance, a nonprofit organization seeking to pave the way for a new kind of healthcare in Africa, the kind that's gospel-centric, native, and self-sustaining. We are your co-hosts. My name is Ruth Gatto Coleman.
My name is Dr. Sam Khan Gatto.
And we are the co-founders of the Jonah Inheritance. Our hope with this podcast is to share stories from perspectives that otherwise may not have been considered. And so today we are talking about our 2022 medical trip. So our goal really for this trip was to lay the groundwork for ultimately our comprehensive medical center that we want to build. But it was also about partnering with our local partner in Nigeria, going into the system and really understanding some of the issues that they face. So what we did was we brought a team of 15 individuals from all walks of lives. I think we had, including Sam, 3 ENT surgeons. We had 2 pastors, a pastor's wife. We had a licensed counselor. We had some teachers. Who else did we have? I think that was, and then our national team. Mm-hmm. And so what we want to do today was just talk about the trip and really how it pointed to our model. So can you kind of just explain a little bit more of that?
Yeah, the trip was really, it was a great trip. And you remember how nervous we were? I mean, the planning that went into this.
Oh my goodness. The logistics to get 15 people to Nigeria. And here's the thing about Nigeria. We love our home country. But the process to get a visa is not like the process to get an American visa. Nigeria requires an in-person, you have to come in person.
Yeah.
And to get your biometrics, they put you through the ringer to really get it.
They really don't make it easy.
They don't really make it easy. And so we were concerned that this would be like a deterrent for the people that were coming on the team. But we really had a good team internally that really helped make this process.
It was a logistical challenge that I think I have to give you credit. You actually pulled it off, Ruth.
Yes, I was. There was a lot of sleepless nights.
Yeah.
There was a lot of phone calls on the day of people's appointments saying they need this. Because here's the thing. Nigeria will tell you one thing on the website, and so you get that information. And then when you actually go to the embassy, it's a different story.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of sleepless nights, phone calls, and just making sure that we did everything the right way.
You know, it's funny that it may be worthwhile to talk about. It actually, where should I begin?
It may be worthwhile.
Yeah. So it's funny. It may actually be worthwhile to talk about our trip back and some of the testing.
I know we
suspicious testing that we got, but that's a little glimpse into the Nigerian healthcare system.
Right.
That may have actually ended up working out in our favor, but we could talk about that later. But
yes,
the trip itself was it was a little different. It was something that we haven't really done before, in the sense that most of the time, whenever we went to Nigeria, it was a familial thing. It was we were going as Nigerian citizens and in a different capacity, but it was still us. And so there were certain considerations that we don't typically have to contend with because it's we're familiar with the territory. But now that we're bringing others, we had to really think through from the bottom from the very, very first steps, what it would look like to bring someone on. Mm-hmm. And I really felt like they pulled it off. But suffice to say, I think it was a wonderful trip.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, for us, it really did help us from the sustainability perspective, but also from the indigenous perspective as well. I would say I'd flip that actually. It would help us more on the indigenous and the sustainability perspective. And so this one was purely medical, it wasn't true. We weren't looking to establish connections. And at this point, we'd actually purchased the land. And so we were going to get a chance to see that. Our goal was to deliver care. That was the secondary goal. The primary goal was actually just to train physicians.
Yeah.
And so the care delivery, the patient care was a bystander, and our focus, we thought, was if we can train physicians, the natural outcome is going to be that patients are taken care of. So it was wonderful from that perspective. And for our first crack at it, I think we had a good place to start.
Yes.
We weren't able to train as many physicians as we had hoped. A lot of that had to do with just some of the administrative and logistic hurdles. But we were able to train about 3 or 4 physicians in some ENT surgeries. But we were able to train more residents and medical students in CPR, and we gave a couple lectures as well. And then we were able to train many physicians in terms of trauma-informed counseling from a mental health perspective.
Yes.
But that is just the general overview. But it was a wonderful trip. It was very taxing.
Oh my goodness, it was so taxing.
But we really felt like it was a good first crack at missions trips and establishing a system to train physicians and really learned a lot about some of the things that we're going to do in our own facility.
Yeah. I think, what that trip did too was just kind of give us a microcosm of what it looks like in the totality of what we're going to do, where you're hitting the mental health perspective, you're hitting the spiritual perspective, you're hitting the training piece, and then the infrastructure, like what does it really look like to have the appropriate infrastructure to be able to do the work that we need to do. But I would love to talk about, so on this trip, we had Dr. Paul Tennant, is a head and neck surgeon. And then we had Dr. Jay Klein, who's an ENT surgeon. You guys are really good friends.
Yes.
And I think what I loved about this trip was seeing you guys' friendship and coming together to really provide the training and to provide high quality care in a context that you're unfamiliar with because you don't have the necessary tools and equipment that you're used to. But then co-laboring with our native physicians and the nurses and the medical workers there to really provide care. So tell me, on that first day when you guys saw patients, like what did you experience? What was going through your mind?
Yeah. So what was going through my mind was how, I'd been in this system before. I'd been to this hospital twice in 2018 and in 2021. So I knew what to expect, but bringing your friends into something like this and not knowing if they'll what they'll think of things and how they'll react to not having the necessary tools and equipment was always, just I wonder how this is going to work, and that's exactly why I brought them. So I brought people that I had relational currency with. So I reached out to Dr. Paul Tennant, and the way that we met was I was a medical student at the Medical University of South Carolina, and Jay at the same time. He's my best friend and college roommate from college, and obviously. And then he was a resident at Medical University of South Carolina as well. And Dr. Paul Tennant was a fellow who was training. He's a fellow is somebody who does an extra year to get specific training in a certain aspect of ENT. And so he happened to be doing his fellowship for 1 year at the Medical University of South Carolina. And during that time, we became friends. So it was our crossing paths together was very brief. And so that relationship has continued throughout the years. And so I reached out to them and said, hey, I really think this is something that I would like for you to be a part of. And so when they came, it just the thought was, okay, these are friends. This is going to be hard, but there's relational currency. Hopefully they can understand what we're trying to accomplish. And we did have challenges there. There were a lot of logistical issues that we just didn't have control over.
Right.
But over time, we actually see ourselves being able to develop more and more control as we have these mission trips. And we were limited by our equipment, and that obviously hindered things. And but we were still able to perform at the time, I think it was 15 surgeries. So we performed 15 surgeries over the course of about 4 or 5 days, which was, to be honest, really a win. When we arrived, there was the plans that we had set into motion just weren't a reality. And so we hit the ground realizing that we were going to have to essentially improvise everything. And so we were able to still perform 15 surgeries. The most important one for me was the total laryngectomy.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that one?
Yes. A total laryngectomy is a surgery that involves removing cancer from someone's throat or voice box. And so we had identified several patients who were good candidates for that. It's something that we're trained to do in residency, and some people can do that without additional fellowship training. But with Dr. Tennant on our team, we felt like that's something that he had the skill set to do, and it was something that he could teach.
Right.
And it's a good surgery to know and have a skill set to do in a context like Nigeria, because oftentimes with cancers, you need to treat that with chemotherapy and radiation, but it's very costly, and Nigeria doesn't have the infrastructure for that. So if a patient presents with a head and neck cancer that's pretty advanced, the option of chemotherapy radiation isn't there. This surgery actually gives a physician some means to provide treatment.
Right.
And it's not really curative. It can be. The surgery itself can cure the cancer, but usually the standard is that you get radiation or chemotherapy in addition. But in this case, it can buy somebody anywhere from 5 to 10 years of life, because most of these cancers will end up suffocating a patient. So we wanted that skill set. We wanted to train physicians to be able to do that, because it provided something that they could, a treatment modality that they could use to help patients in a setting where there's no chemotherapy, radiation.
Right.
And then Dr. Klein he has really, really good ear training. And so we knew that a huge problem in Nigeria is chronic ear disease, and that's ear infections and conditions that happen when people have chronic ear infections. And a lot of times it ends up with people having holes in their eardrums that need to be reconstructed. And so he had good training there. And my job was just to do mop-up duty. So
and keep them sane.
So I did, I filled in any of the procedures that there was not enough people to do, or if Dr. Klein or Dr. Tennant were busy. And I also manned the clinic because I at least could understand the language, and so the barrier wasn't there.
Right.
And performed a handful of surgeries, but nothing, not to the same degree. And a lot of the logistical challenges that we were having to overcome that were there. So it was wonderful to have them on the team. They were fantastic. Yeah. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. They went in head first. They were fully committed. You could see they were invested. And you could see like the light bulbs just going off in their heads, and how can we make this better? And I know you guys you left around 8 o'clock and wouldn't come back till almost 8 o'clock at night. You guys were the last people back.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, but I think what that trip did was just, it emphasize the importance of training. And that's what our goal really is in this upcoming year, is emphasizing vital ongoing medical training that physicians need to really become better at their craft.
Correct.
And so we did the basic life support training, and then the training through the specialized services. But I think I was really encouraged by just seeing the heart and the dedication that you guys had. And we had testimonies afterwards of the patients, and they were just so grateful and so thankful for the work that you guys were able to do. And I'm just excited about like moving forward, that we'll be able to do this for more people. And I think, going back to your point, this really allows us to work out our model in the context that we're in, and be able to tap into the relationships and the information that is there.
Yes. The training aspect was the focus.
Yeah.
And we kept saying from the beginning, our goal isn't to perform 200 surgeries. We're not trying to perform the most amount of surgeries here. What we're trying to do is perform as many surgeries as we need to train the physicians that were there. And so the initial plan before we went was that we were going to have access to residents, and then shortly before we left, we found out that there were doctors in the community who would be interested. And so we decided to pivot from from residents to already practicing physicians who this would be high yield. And so we didn't have the turnout we were expecting. We ended up having maybe about 3 or 4 physicians that were there. And so those are the physicians that we trained, that we did the procedures with. But then from the CPR perspective, that was really probably our most successful training endeavor. And that was done by Zach Foster, who's a fireman here in Lynchburg, Virginia. And Zach is just a phenomenal human being.
He is from Texas. Is he from Texas? His Texas accent is strong, but he is such a sweetheart.
Well, see, the thing about Zach is that Zach hates flying. He has a pathological aversion to flying, and but he in Nigeria is not a very it's not a hop, skip, and a jump from the United States. So that's probably 16 to 24 hours worth of flights, and he did it, and he came willingly, and he provided us with the equipment we needed, and he worked literally around the clock. He was the only person, and he trained 36 physicians. And there's a funny story actually. We were one of the first days that we got there. We were lined up to do certain surgeries, and this is one of the hiccups that we had. And we're sitting there waiting and wondering, where in the world? Why are we just sitting here waiting? We're ready to go, and we can't find our anesthesiologist. And so I'm starting to get frustrated because I'm like, Dr. Klein and Dr. Tennant are here. We gotta, I want to make sure that their time is being used, isn't being wasted. And so we scour the hospital to find out where our anesthesiologist is. And lo and behold, he's sitting in a CPR session with Zach Foster. And we're like, okay, well, what does that really say about your healthcare system if your anesthesiologist is getting a CPR course? So it was, so once he got finished, we actually were able to start the surgery. And but Zach really was phenomenal because he allowed us, we were able to train 36 medical students and physicians, residents and physicians in CPR training. And before we left, they actually used that in the emergency scenario. In the emergency department. So once again, it was really heavily focused on just training indigenous physicians, finding physicians who already have a certain skill set that you can build on which you can build. And then we did that.
And they were really grateful because we did a follow-up and did testimonies, and a lot of them were saying that they learned something that they didn't know before. There was a pediatric nurse who said that he realized that his training was outdated and that he's seen his resuscitation rates increase dramatically. And that's such a simple fix. And I think we realize that this is a gap that we can fill and train. And we have the infrastructure with Bingham University Teaching Hospital. The physicians are there, and they just need people that will come and give them the training that they need. So I think that was a big win for us. But I wanted to end with how we ended the trip. So we had this trip. Obviously, it's in the middle of the pandemic. And so in order to enter the United States, you have to have a COVID test. And so I think 2 days before we're supposed to leave, there's a few of us that had started to get sick. And so we were like, that was my fear. I said, God, please let us not bring these people here. And then they have a negative COVID test and they have to stay in Nigeria for an extended period of time before they can come home. So we were able to get somebody who, was it a physician, to come and do the COVID testing at the guest house that we were. And he showed up 6:00 prompt, did all the tests, and we were just praying to God.
Now this for the record, like, this physician was doing something that was he seemed pretty reputable. He had apparently been traveling with the World Health Organization and had done multiple tests on. So this was not like a doc in the
Yeah,
box.
yeah.
This was
Yeah.
was someone that was.
And it's through, because I think Nigeria had certain centers that you had to go through, and he was from one of those centers. Yeah.
And so logistically, it was very difficult. So the problem is, the rules made it, we had to have a negative test on the day that we were leaving.
Yeah, 24 hours.
And so, but
and our flight was 11:20 at night.
Correct. And it was going to be very, very difficult to get 11 or 15 people to this place and get this and still do the things that we had scheduled for the day. And so he, apparently this was a service that he offered not just to us, but to others. And so he came to the hotel and set up his equipment and gave us the tests. And so we're literally on the way. We're literally on the way to the airport.
So we had stopped at the property so that everybody could see the property. And we had put all the donors' names on the foundation blocks to just kind of, as a way of honoring and thanking them for, coming alongside and seeing this fruition and this vision come to fruition. And so I was the main contact to where I was going to get everybody's test results. So I'm sitting there, refreshing on my phone, trying to see, okay, we need to get this thing. So I see it arrived in my mailbox, in my email. And so I'm swiping and I'm like, I have to look. I'm going to look at all of them first to see if anybody has a negative test. And I'm trying to think, what's my plan B if somebody has a negative test? So I'm looking at my phone and I'm sliding. It's like green, negative, green, 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 green. And everybody's was negative. And then I was like, we have a negative test.
Yeah. So it was, I think we're on the way to the airport. Like,
we were.
We're on our way to the airport when we finally get this. And so everyone's excited that, yay, all of our tests are negative. Because I was preparing myself to stay behind with whoever wasn't. Because I was like, I'm not leaving anyone behind. No. I'm not bringing them to Nigeria and saying, hey, bye. I was like, and thankfully Rachel was there, so she understood. And I told Rachel, I was like, Rachel, I'm not going back unless these are all negative. And then we get on the plane, we're praising God, we're saying, thank the Lord, we're not leaving anybody in the United States. And then we land like the next day.
We land the next day. So I had to start getting sick. I'm going to be honest. Like that day, I was delirious.
Yeah.
I felt feverish. I did not feel good. But I just thought it was pure exhaustion because we did a lot in a short amount of time. And I don't remember, I was losing stuff on the flight because I just didn't remember things. And so when we get home, it's 10 o'clock at night. I don't know why I'm checking my email at 10 o'clock at night. That's how much of a workaholic I am. And so I look at the email and I get an email from one of the team members who said that they had COVID. And then I was like, oh my goodness, maybe I have COVID. Took a test. As soon as my saliva touched the test,
it said positive.
And then it made sense. And then I had dropped it in the chat that, listen, I have COVID. Please, everybody, take a test. Make sure. And there were several of us that ended up having it. Interestingly enough, none of the physicians had it.
Yeah.
You guys were like scot-free. But I ended up having it. And I think two of our sisters ended up having it.
Yeah.
And then Cindy, who was the pastor's wife and teacher, ended up having it.
Yeah, but the irony is that we had a PCR test less than a day before that said that we were all negative. And so we just started that. I remember Dr. Tennant was just like, that's awfully convenient that those tests are all negative. And I was like, I'm just going to trust that this is accurate. And that because I have nothing to do with, we didn't manipulate the test at all.
We did nothing. We went through the proper channels.
And then I think in looking back at that story, you get the sense that, okay, something was amiss there. And so whether it's, whether or not we truly were negative or not, it just kind of gives you a glimpse into the state of the healthcare system. Thankfully, we were fine. We all recovered and we're all doing fine. But it was definitely an interesting way to end the trip. It
really was an interesting way to end the trip. And so we're going to wrap up this episode. We actually have documented the whole trip. And soon we're going to have it's about an 11-episode docu-series. It's called A Mission of Hope. meet the people that are inspiring real change in African healthcare. And one of them is just like you. So look out for that. It will be coming out soon. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And we look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode.